Hi students, welcome to SPSVERSITY. Today we are going to deal about chemical coordination and integration. So what is this chemical coordination and integration? In animals, generally coordination is brought by neural system, majorly by neural system as well as by endocrine system. So this endocrine system jointly along with neural system, it will perform control and coordination. So what is the need of endocrine system? Why? Because nerve fibers cannot innervate all the cells of the body. So in our body there are 10 billions of cells. So it is not possible to all the nerve cells to enter into 10 billion cells. So that's the reason why endocrine system is needed for coordinate the functions. What this endocrine system consists of? The endocrine system consists of endocrine glands. So these endocrine glands are also called ductless glands. Why they are called ductless glands? The reason is they release their secretions directly into the blood. That is, hormones are released into blood. Through blood, they reach to specific target organ to initiate a particular change. That is, to initiate a particular metabolic process. These secretions through blood reach to target organ. So the secretions of endocrine glands are called hormones. So the chemicals, whatever they are secreted, they are called hormones. So what are hormones? So hormones are non-nutrient chemicals which act as intercellular messengers, and they are produced in minute quantity. They are produced in very minute quantity. They are produced in milligrams. So these endocrine glands, which are secrete hormones into the blood in minute quantities. So when we come to endocrine glands in our body, if we start from our head region, in head there are endocrine glands like hypothalamus, pituitary and pineal gland. In the neck region there are thyroid and parathyroid glands. Near to the heart there is thymus. In the junction of stomach and duodenum there is pancreas. Above the kidneys there are adrenal glands. In female, if you take, these are common for both male and female. In female there is ovary. Ovary is also secretes estrogen and progesterone. Testes in males will secrete testosterone, the androgens, the hormones like testosterone. So these are the glands, endocrine glands, which present in humans, which constitute endocrine system. Hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal. Neck has thyroid, parathyroid. Near the heart there is thymus. In the junction of stomach and duodenum there is pancreas. Above the kidneys, each kidney has an adrenal gland, a pair of adrenal gland. Testes, which will produce testosterone. Ovary in females, which will produce estrogen and progesterone. So when we come to hypothalamus, so it contains group of neurosecretory cells. So these neurosecretory cells are called nuclei. So the neurosecretory cells are called nuclei. So which will secrete hormones. So these nuclei will secrete hormones. So what these hormones secreted by hypothalamus will do? It will regulate the synthesis of hormone secretion by pituitary gland. So hypothalamus, the hormones which are secreted by hypothalamus which will influence the pituitary gland hormones, secretion of pituitary gland hormones. So the hormones released from hypothalamus reach anterior pituitary through portal circulatory system. That is, through portal circulatory system, the hormones which are released from hypothalamus, they reach to anterior pituitary. Whereas when you come to posterior pituitary, it is direct under the control of hypothalamus. It is direct under the control of hypothalamus. So here if you see this is anterior pituitary. This is posterior pituitary. So these are this is hypothalamus. Okay. So hypothalamus, whatever the hypothalamus secretes, in this there are which will influence, that is they are called releasing hormones, which will have a promoting effect. They are called releasing hormones. Which has inhibitory effect, they are called inhibitory hormones. So in this, there are hormones which show promoting as well as inhibitory effect. And this anterior pituitary, the hormones which are secreted, they will reach to through blood. They reach to systemic blood organs. So they reach to systemic. Okay. So here when you take the pituitary gland, it is located in sella turcica. That name of the bone cavity is sella turcica. And it is attached to hypothalamus by a stalk-like structure that is called infundibulum. So pituitary gland is attached to hypothalamus by a stalk-like structure that is infundibulum. Okay. So when you take pituitary gland, in pituitary gland, that is there are two parts, that is anterior pituitary. So anterior pituitary is called adenohypophysis. Posterior pituitary is called neurohypophysis. So in pituitary gland there are again two parts, anterior and posterior. So neurohypophysis will secrete two hormones, that is oxytocin and vasopressin. Whereas when you come to anterior pituitary, again in this there are two parts, pars distalis and pars intermedio. So pars distalis will secrete hormones like growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticoid stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, FSH. Pars intermedia will secrete one hormone, that is melanocyte stimulating hormone. So these are the hormones secreted by pituitary gland. So first we'll discuss hormones which are secreted from adenohypophysis. That is the posterior pituitary, the anterior pituitary gland, which is called adenohypophysis. They are growth hormone. One hormone name is growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone TSH, adrenocorticoid stimulating hormone LH and FSH. So growth hormone will promote the growth. So excess secretion of growth hormone will lead to gigantism. Gigantism means the tall. Less secretion will lead to dwarfism. That is, height is less. Prolactin, it will secrete growth of mammary glands so that production of milk is done. So function of prolactin is the growth of mammary glands and production of milk. Thyroid stimulating hormone, it stimulates the production and release of thyroid hormone. That is, it will stimulate the thyroid gland which is present in the neck region. So the thyroid gland is present in neck region, which is influenced by thyroid stimulating hormone TSH. LH and FSH, when you come to LH and FSH, they will stimulate the gonads. Gonads means the reproductive parts. So when you come to these reproductive parts, in males it is testes and females it is ovary. So in males, LH will stimulate the synthesis of secretion of androgen hormone. Androgen means the male hormones. That the major one is the testosterone. In androgens, the major one is testosterone. And in female, LH will induce ovulation. So ovulation means release of ovum from ovary. That is the release of ovum from Graafian follicle of ovary, which is stimulated by LH. Okay. And when you come to the parts, the another hormone which is secreted, that is by adenohypophysis, that is melanocyte stimulating hormone, which is secreted by pars intermedia. It will act on the cells called melanocytes, which will secrete a pigment. The melanocytes will secrete a pigment. So the pigment name is melanin, which will regulate skin pigmentation. So which will regulate skin pigmentation. And when you come to oxytocin and vasopressin, they are released from posterior pituitary gland. So they are released from posterior pituitary gland. In this, the one is oxytocin, so which plays an important role during parturition. So the childbirth is during the time the act of childbirth is called parturition. So here it causes contraction of uterus. So the oxytocin will cause the contraction of uterus. Okay, that is, in uterus the middle layer is made up of myometrium, is made up of smooth muscles which are excited by this hormone, so which leads to parturition as well as the milk ejection from mammary glands. Vasopressin, which is called antidiuretic hormone, so it is secreted in our body when our body is in dehydrated state. So dehydrated means when there is a loss of water from the body. When the body faces water deficiency, it will stimulate absorption of water and electrolytes in the kidney. So these two hormones are secreted by the posterior pituitary gland, that is oxytocin and vasopressin. The next gland which is present in the brain, that is pineal gland, so which is present on the dorsal side of forebrain and release an hormone called melatonin. So what is the function of this melatonin? To regulate diurnal rhythms, that is activities during daytime of the body, sleep and wake cycle, body temperature. So this pineal gland is a cone-shaped gland which will secrete the hormone melatonin. And this melatonin will influence the metabolism and the pigmentation. And it will also affect in females specifically menstrual cycle. So the pineal gland will influence the menstrual cycle in females and our defense capability. It not only influences the menstrual cycle as well as it will influence the defense capability. So these are the functions of pineal gland. So till now we have studied about hypothalamus, pituitary gland. Next we have studied about what we call the pineal gland, which are present in brain. Now next the gland is the thyroid gland, which is present in neck. So this thyroid gland which is present in neck, it has two lobes, and these two lobes are connected by isthmus. So it is only one, it has two lobes which are connected by isthmus. So thyroid gland is made up of follicles and stromal tissues. So it is made up of follicles and stromal tissue. Okay. For the functioning of this thyroid gland effectively, that is for synthesis of thyroid gland, we require, that is, iodine. So iodine is the element which is required for proper secretion of thyroid hormones. So that's why the salt which we are consuming, it is iodized salt. If the deficiency of iodine is due to this, it leads to hypothyroidism, which is called goiter. Okay. What will happen due to this? Due to this, during hypothyroidism occurs during pregnancy, it leads to stunted growth of baby. Stunted growth means there is no proper growth of baby. Mental retardation, psychological issues. Besides this, the thyroid hormones will regulate basal metabolic rate. Okay. This basal metabolic rate will support the process of red blood cell formation and also the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, which come under BMR, basal metabolic rate, which is very important for the body and which is a standard value. So the hormone which is secreted, the thyroid hormones are like thyrocalcitonin, which will regulate, that is thyrocalcitonin will regulate, that is, it will regulate the blood calcium levels. So thyrocalcitonin will regulate the blood calcium levels. Okay. So here if you take this thyroid gland, that is, it has two parts, that is follicles and stromal tissue. So from follicles there are two hormones are secreted. One is tetraiodothyronin, another one is thyroid. So T4, it is called T4, tetraiodothyronin. And another one is triiodothyronin, T3. So T3 and T4 from follicles. And besides this, there is another hormone which is called thyrocalcitonin, which is secreted from thyroid gland, which will control the blood calcium levels, that is, which will regulate the blood calcium levels. So these are the two lobes of thyroid gland, and the junction which joins these two lobes of thyroid gland, this junction is called isthmus. So this junction is called isthmus. So this is about thyroid gland. So another gland is present in the neck region, that is parathyroid gland. There are two pairs of parathyroid gland, which are present on the back side of thyroid gland, which will secrete a peptide hormone, that is parathyroid hormones, PTH. So which will regulate calcium ion concentration in the blood. It helps in reabsorption of calcium from renal tubules. Renal means it is related to kidneys. It will absorb the calcium from the renal tubules, that is from kidneys. Okay. And moreover, it is a hypercalcemic hormone. Hypercalcemic hormone means which will increase the blood calcium levels. So which will increase the blood calcium levels. Hypercalcemic means which will increase. Where it will increase? It will increase in blood, the calcium levels in the blood. So parathyroid gland is related to the increase in blood calcium level. So here you can see in the picture. So they are on the back of thyroid gland, a pair on either side. So total there are 4 parathyroid glands, which will secrete parathormone, that is parathyroid hormone, PTH, which will increase the blood calcium level. Okay. And the next gland is Thymus gland, which is located near to the heart. So this thymus gland, which is present in the thoracic region, it will secrete an hormone called thymosin. The hormone is secreted is thymosin, which will help in differentiation of T lymphocytes. Here T means thymus. The T means thymus. So in thymus, lymphocytes are differentiated, which will stimulate, that is cell-mediated immunity. That is, in short form, it is called CMI. So what this T lymphocytes will do? The T lymphocytes will do, that is, they will help B lymphocytes to secrete antibodies. So this will promote the production of antibodies to provide humoral immunity. So B cells, that is B lymphocytes, will promote humoral immunity, and T cells will promote cell-mediated immunity. Humoral means where antibodies are secreted into the blood. So cell-mediated immunity means which can differentiate self and non-self. So which can differentiate self and non-self. So in our immunity there are two types of lymphocytes, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. So as the OAS moves on, what happens is thymus will gradually decrease in size. As the thymus decreases in size, the secretion of thymosin also will be decreased. So that's the reason why the immune responses become very weak in old age. So this is thymus gland, which is present very nearer to heart and the aorta. So which is present very nearer to heart and aorta, which play an important role in immunity. The role of thymosins is immunity. So which will play an important role in immunity. So follow us on social media, SPSVERSITY. So now we will discuss about adrenal gland. So a pair of adrenal glands are present on the top of the kidneys. On the apex of the kidneys there are a pair of adrenal glands. That is in the anterior part of each kidney. And this adrenal gland is divided into two parts. The outside is called adrenal cortex and the innermost tissues is called adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla will secrete adrenaline and it will secrete noradrenaline. It will secrete two hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these two are combinedly called catecholamine. And these are generally named as emergency hormones. So which are secreted during emergency situations. Due to these hormones, that is catecholamine hormone, that is adrenaline or noradrenaline, it will increase alertness, pupil dilation, sweating, increase of heartbeat, increase of rate of respiration and glycogenolysis. That is splitting of glycogen into glucose. The glycogen which is present stored in our body, it is split into glucose. It is called glycogenolysis. Okay. So this is the diagram of adrenal gland. So this is kidney. On the top of the kidney there is a adrenal gland. A pair of kidneys. On each anterior part of the kidney there is an adrenal gland. So the outer surface, that is called adrenal cortex and the innermost part is called adrenal medulla. And this adrenal medulla will secrete emergency hormones. Emergency hormones means which come under adrenaline and noradrenaline. So there are two types of hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline, which are called catecholamines combined, which are secreted during emergency conditions. Okay, what about adrenal cortex? It will secrete hormones, they are called glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, which are combinedly called corticoids. So glucocorticoids are involved in carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, for example, if you take in this glucocorticoids, there is one hormone cortisol, which is involved in cardiovascular activity. Cardiovascular activity means activity which is related to heart, activity of the heart, and kidney functioning, renal functioning. So it is anti-inflammatory and suppress immune response. What these glucocorticoids will do generally? They will stimulate gluconeogenesis, splitting of lipids, lipolysis, splitting of proteins, proteolysis. Okay, glucocorticoids will do gluconeogenesis, lipolysis, proteolysis. What mineralocorticoids will do? They will regulate water and electrolyte content of the body. So they will regulate water and electrolyte content of the body. Okay. So in adrenal gland, adrenal cortex will secrete corticoids, adrenal medulla will secrete, that is what we call catecholamines. In catecholamines there are adrenaline and noradrenaline. In corticoids there are glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. Glucocorticoids are involved in carbohydrate metabolism, and mineralocorticoids are involved in the water and electrolyte contents of the body. So this is about the adrenal gland, which is present on the apex of each kidney. So the next gland is pancreas. So this pancreas has a importance. This is the only gland which shows, that is, both endocrine as well as exocrine. That is, it has both endocrine part as well as exocrine part. So exocrine part will secrete pancreatic juice, so which will be released into the duodenum. Pancreatic juice is released into the duodenum, which helps in the digestion process. This process is done, that is the digestion process. Okay. And when we come to this, that is the endocrine part. So the endocrine part of is called islets of Langerhans, and it has two cells, alpha cells and beta cells. What alpha cells will do, what beta cells will do. So whatever it is, the islets of Langerhans, the alpha cells, beta cells are involved, that is, in regulation of blood sugar level. Alpha cells will secrete an hormone glucagon, and beta cells will secrete an hormone insulin. What glucagon will do? It will stimulate glycogenolysis. So glycogenolysis means splitting of glycogen. So due to splitting of glycogen, what will happen is, thus due to splitting of glycogen, glucose is released. And this glucose is released into bloodstream, which will increase the blood glucose level. So which is called hyperglycemia. Insulin is a hormone that plays an important role in regulation of glucose homeostasis. So when it is secreted, it is secreted when the glucose levels are very high. So it will trigger the rapid movement of glucose from blood to hepatocytes and adipocytes. Hepatocytes means liver cells, adipocytes, adipose tissue, which will result in decrease in blood sugar level, that is blood glucose levels, which is hypoglycemia. So the action of glucagon and insulin are quite opposite. Glucagon is hyperglycemia, which will increase blood sugar level. Insulin causes hypoglycemia, which will decrease blood glucose levels. Due to lack of proper secretion of insulin, it leads to diabetes. That is, so prolonged hyperglycemia leads to complex disorder, that is diabetes mellitus. In this, what happens is, due to lack of proper diabetes a proper lack of insulin secretion, the glucose is lost through urine and formation of ketone bodies in the body takes place. In diabetes, there are type 1 and type 2. So type 1 where there is less secretion of glucose, type 2 is resistant to cells to the action of insulin. So this is the pancreas, which is located in the junction of stomach and the small intestine, which has both endocrine and exocrine gland. That's why it is called mixed gland. In the entire endocrine system, this is the only mixed gland which has both endocrine as well as exocrine parts. Okay. So till now we have discussed about the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, pineal gland, thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, and next pancreas, which are common to both male and female. So now we are going to discuss about testes, which is present in males. So which is the primary reproductive part of male reproductive system. So which are called gonads. So these are primary sex organs which will also function as endocrine glands. Which will also function as endocrine glands. Okay. So in testes there is a specific cells, they are called Leydig cells, or they are also called interstitial cells. So which will produce a group of hormones that is called androgen, that is the male hormones. In androgen, the specific, that is the prominent hormone is testosterone, which will regulate the maturation of primary sex organs and spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis means formation of sperms. The process of formation of sperms is called spermatogenesis. Okay. So here when you come to testes, testes is made up of, inside testes there are a lot of seminiferous tubules. In between these seminiferous tubules there are interstitial tissue, or it is also called stomatal tissue. So the cells present in this, so they are called Leydig cells or interstitial cells, okay, which are present in the intertubular spaces. Intertubular spaces means which are present between the seminiferous tubules. So which will secrete androgens. In this the major one is testosterone. So androgens will act on central nervous system and influence sexual behavior. So they will influence sexual. So this is the transverse section of testes, where here we can see so many circular shaped structures. So each one is one seminiferous tubule. So each one is one seminiferous tubule. Okay. So this seminiferous tubule, each one which is present the seminiferous tubule, inside the seminiferous tubule, okay, there are spermatogonia and the Sertoli cells. And in between there is, in between the seminiferous tubule, there are interstitial cells, or they are also called Leydig cells, which will secrete the hormones, that is androgens. In that the major one is the testosterone. So inside if you see the seminiferous tubule, there are spermatogonia which will form spermatozoa. and there are cuboidal shaped cells, that is Sertoli cells. They are called nourishing cells, which will provide nutrients to the spermatozoa. So which will provide nutrients to spermatozoa. So testes is a primary sex organ which will secrete hormones, that is androgens, which is present in male. Ovary, which is present in females, which is a primary sex organ, and it will secrete two groups of steroidal hormones. So one is estrogen and another one is progesterone. Estrogen is synthesized and secreted by growing ovarian follicles. It is secreted from ovarian follicles. That is, in ovary there are different developmental stages of follicles. That is, primary follicle, secondary follicle, and the next one is tertiary follicle, and the final mature one is called Graafian follicle. So the final and the mature one is Graafian follicle, which will form which will release this one. Okay. So from these follicles, estrogen is secreted. Okay. So once after Graafian follicle releases ovum, that is, the process is called ovulation. So the release of ovum from Graafian follicle, it is called ovum, which is stimulated by luteinizing hormone. And the development of this follicles is stimulated by follicular stimulating hormone, FSH. After releasing of this ovum from the Graafian follicle, the empty Graafian follicle will develop into a structure that is called corpus luteum. A structure that is called corpus luteum, which will secrete progesterone, the hormone. Okay. So estrogen is secreted from follicles and the progesterone is secreted from Graafian follicle after this releasing of ovum. So estrogen is for the growth of female secondary sex organs and for the development of ovarian follicles, mammary glands, and regulation of sexual behavior. But when you come to progesterone, it is related to, it regulates pregnancy. It is called pregnancy hormone. It also acts on mammary glands and stimulates formation of alveoli and milk secretion. So this estrogen and progesterone are seen only in females, which are secreted from ovary. So this is the transverse section of ovary. So in this transverse section of ovary, if you observe very carefully, there are follicles which are at different developmental stages. That is primary follicle, secondary follicle, okay, and the final mature follicle is called Graafian follicle, from which the ovum is released. After releasing of ovum from this, it develops into corpus luteum, which will secrete progesterone. So which will secrete progesterone. So this is how the hormones are released from ovary. Majorly two steroidal hormones, one is estrogen and another one is progesterone. Okay, till now we have discussed about various endocrine glands like hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal, thyroid, parathyroid, thymus, pancreas, testes, ovary. These all are the endocrine glands. Not only this, even some internal organs, like if you take heart, kidney and gastrointestinal tract. So this heart, kidney and gastrointestinal tract will secrete hormones. Like for example, if we take heart, atrial wall of heart will secrete an hormone called atrial natriuretic factor, which will decrease blood pressure. This is one hormone ANF which is secreted from heart. The juxtaglomerular cells which are present in kidney will produce an hormone that is erythropoietin, which will stimulate the erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis means the formation of erythrocytes, the red blood cells. So the process of formation of erythrocyte, the red blood cells, is called erythropoiesis, which is stimulated by hormone erythropoietin, secreted by kidney. And when it is gastrointestinal tract, it will secrete 4 major peptide hormones. So one is gastrin, which will stimulate secretion of HCl in the stomach, and pepsinogen, which is an inactive enzyme. So pepsinogen is an inactive enzyme, which is activated by the action of HCl. So by the action of HCl, it forms into an enzyme that is pepsin, which will act on proteins. Secretin acts on exocrine pancreas, which will stimulate secretion of water and bicarbonate ions. Cholecystokinin, which will stimulate the secretion of pancreatic enzymes. Gastric inhibitory peptide hormone, which will inhibit gastric secretion and motility. Gastrin will stimulate gastrin inhibitory, GIP will inhibit reaction. Cholecystokinin will act on pancreas, that is which will stimulate the secretion of pancreas and bile juice from liver. Okay. Secretin will act on exocrine part of pancreas to secrete water and bicarbonate ions. Okay. So till now we have discussed that not only endocrine glands, even internal organs like heart, kidneys, gastrointestinal tract will act as an endocrine glands. Heart will secrete atrial natriuretic factor ANF. Kidney will secrete erythropoietin, a hormone which will stimulate erythropoiesis. And next, when we come to gastrointestinal tract, it will secrete gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, gastroinhibitory protein, that is peptide hormone. Okay, we are now discussing that hormones will be released into the blood and they will act on the target organ. What is the mechanism of hormone action? So hormone will show their impact on, that is their show effect on target tissues by binding to specific protein. They are called hormone receptors, which are present on target tissues. So binding of receptors leads to hormone receptor complex. That is, hormone receptor complex means hormones plus the specific receptor, specific protein. Okay, this is called hormone receptor complex. Okay, so hormone receptors plus hormones, it is called hormone receptor complex, which leads to change in target tissue. On the basis of chemical nature of hormones, they are grouped into different categories like peptide hormones, polypeptide and proteinaceous hormones, which will include insulin, glucagon, pituitary hormones, hypothalamic hormone. These all are peptide hormones. Steroidal hormones like cortisol, testosterone, progesterone, these all are steroidal hormones, estrogen, these are. Iodothyronine is thyroid hormone, tetraiodothyronine, triiodothyronine. Amino acid derivatives, that is epinephrine. So such like there are 4 categories of hormones based on their nature: steroidal, iodothyronine, amino acid, peptide, polypeptide, proteinaceous hormone. Okay. So here when you take the peptide hormones, the action of peptide hormones. So this is hormone. For example, take FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, which will stimulate the development of follicles in females. That is, it is a follicular stimulating hormone. So this follicular stimulating hormone combines with the receptor present on the ovarian cell membrane. Now it forms an hormone receptor complex. So hormone combined with hormone receptor, it is called hormone receptor complex. So once the hormone binds to hormone receptor, it will lead to change in the target tissue. That is, it will lead to a change, that is, it will generate a response, one, that is generation of secondary messenger, either it may be calcium or cyclic amide, which will lead to biochemical process. Finally, it leads to physiological response, that is growth of ovary. That is, when you take peptide hormones, they will not enter into the cell. They will just attach to the receptor present on the cell membrane of the target tissue. So these hormones generally bind to membrane receptors, hormone receptors. They will not enter into target cells, which will generate second messenger, and finally it will regulate cellular metabolism. In the example, it is shown that is growth of ovary, that is ovarian growth. So ovarian growth means follicular development inside the ovary by FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, which comes under peptide hormones. Okay. So these are some hormones like peptide hormones which doesn't enter into the target cells, which will generate second messenger, finally physiological response. Then what about steroidal hormones? What these steroidal hormones will do? Which will enter into the target cell. So they will enter into the target cell and they will interact with intracellular receptors. That is, they will regulate the gene expression or chromosome function. Okay. Interaction with hormone receptor complex within the genome. So which will lead to physiological or developmental effects. That is, these hormones will enter into the cell, into the target tissue. They are not like peptide hormones. So they will enter into the target tissue. So when they enter into the target tissue, they will interact with the genome, which will regulate the gene expression, which leads to the physiological effect. Here you can see this is hormone, steroidal hormone estrogen, which has entered into the cell, ultimately entered into the nucleus. It has formed receptor hormone complex, that is, it has combined with the DNA, which will regulate the physiological process like tissue growth and differentiation. So this is how the steroidal hormones will act and the peptidal hormones will act. So we have studied the mechanism of action of peptide hormones and steroidal hormones, and we have discussed about the endocrine system, and in the endocrine system we discussed about different endocrine glands which are present in human body. So that's all for today's session. Thank you for watching SPSVERSITY. Follow us on SPSVERSITY social media. We'll meet in the next session.